The elevators of Grant Tower chimed softly as midnight settled over the city. The 50-story glass building, home of Grant Industries, gleamed like a monument of power against the skyline. But inside, most lights were dim. Silence reigned, except for the faint squeak of wheels from a janitor's cart rolling down the marble corridor. David Carter hummed quietly as he pushed his cart, his sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms hardened from years of work. At 28, his life was split into two halves, nights cleaning office towers and days buried in textbooks and clinical practice hours. He was only months away from completing his degree in physical therapy. The dream that had fueled him since the tragedy of losing his wife was to help others heal, help them reclaim hope when doctors told them it was gone. The executive floor was always his last stop. Rows of polished doors, brass nameplates, and an air of wealth he had never known. Normally, the offices were dark. Tonight, however, light spilled from under one door, the corner office. He paused. Isabella Grant. The youngest CEO in the city's tech world, Isabella was a figure wrapped in both admiration and fear. At 35, she had turned her father's struggling company into a billion-dollar empire. She was known as ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable. The press called her the Iron Queen of Tech. David knocked gently, expecting no reply. "Come in," came a voice, low, tired, yet commanding. He opened the door. The sight before him startled him. Isabella sat behind her vast mahogany desk, a cascade of papers spread across it. But it wasn't her power that caught his attention. It was the wheelchair. Her posture was stiff, her hands trembling slightly as she sorted documents. Pain medication bottles lined one edge of the desk. For a woman whose name meant control, she looked exhausted, vulnerable, and more than anything, trapped. "Sorry to disturb you, Miss Grant," David said quietly. "I can come back later." Her dark eyes lifted, sharp but weary. "No, stay, I'll be here all night anyway." She gestured toward the endless reports. "Board meeting tomorrow, I need everything flawless. They're waiting for me to fail." David hesitated. His training, half janitor, half healer, saw what others might miss. The rigid way she held her shoulders, the shallow breaths of someone masking pain. 6 months post-injury, and she was still fighting the same battle every hour. "Forgive me," he said carefully, "but when's the last time you rested properly?" Her brows rose at the unexpected question. "Breaks are luxuries I can't afford, mister." "Carter, David Carter." He met her gaze steadily. "With respect, Miss Grant, burnout won't help you prove anything." She gave a bitter laugh. "I'm fine." But she was, he could see it. And for the first time in months, someone dared to look past the CEO title and see the woman, struggling, hurting, still fighting. And though he hadn't yet spoken the words, something stirred inside David Carter that would change both of their lives. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the city lights outside her floor-to-ceiling windows. Isabella adjusted a file with trembling hands, trying to mask her weakness, but David's eyes didn't miss it. He had been trained to notice the smallest signs of strain, the subtle cues of a body in rebellion. "You're staring," she said sharply, as if daring him to comment. "I'm observing," David admitted. "I study physical therapy during the day. It's second nature." That caught her off guard. "Physical therapy." He nodded. 8 months away from finishing my degree." Her lips curved into something between amusement and bitterness. "And yet, here you are, mopping my floors." "Bills don't pay themselves," David replied easily. "Besides, cleaning floors at night gives me time to chase bigger dreams during the day." Something in his calm confidence unsettled her. She had spent half a year surrounded by doctors who spoke in clipped tones, board members who doubted her, and competitors who circled like vultures. None of them had looked at her as David just had, straight, unafraid, human to human. "Tell me," she said suddenly, "what does your training tell you when you look at me?" David hesitated. He wasn't sure how far he should go, but the exhaustion etched into her face convinced him honesty was better than politeness. "Your posture suggests severe muscle tension," he said gently. The way you hold yourself, too rigid, too defensive, tells me your pain isn't managed well. 6 months post-injury, you should be further in recovery. You're burning yourself out, Miss Grant. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Recovery? Every specialist I've seen has told me the same thing: you will never walk again, so forgive me if I don't share your optimism. David felt a spark of frustration, not at her, but at the defeat she had been handed. May I ask, he said carefully, what type of spinal injury? She narrowed her eyes. Why does that matter to a janitor? Because I'm not just a janitor, he replied evenly. I'm a medic turned therapist. I've studied this. Isabella exhaled sharply. Fine, incomplete T12 fracture. David's heart skipped. Incomplete. Yes, and before you light up with false hope, Dr. Mitchell himself told me I would never walk again. He's the best neurosurgeon in the city. He's excellent at surgery, David said, his voice steady but burning with conviction. But recovery is different. It's not just about what was broken. It's about what can be rebuilt. Incomplete T12 injuries often hold potential for significant recovery if therapy is consistent, targeted, and persistent. Her eyes narrowed further. Are you saying every doctor I've paid fortunes to has been wrong? I'm saying, David leaned forward, his voice low but certain, that you are not beyond hope, and if you'll let me, I will help you walk again. The words landed between them like a thunderclap. Isabella's pen stilled on the page. She stared at him, utterly stunned. You'll what? I'll help you walk, he repeated, calm but unwavering. You're serious? Completely. And why? Her tone hardened. What's in it for you, Mr. Carter? For a moment, David didn't answer. Then he said quietly, because everyone deserves the chance to fight for their dreams, and because I made a promise to myself the day I lost my wife, that I would help people others had already given up on. Her breath caught. For the first time in months, Isabella Grant felt something stir inside her that medicine had failed to deliver. Hope. The following morning, Isabella sat at the head of the boardroom table, surrounded by 12 directors. She wore her sharpest navy blazer, her hair styled to perfection, her wheelchair angled so it almost disappeared behind the polished wood. Appearances mattered. Strength mattered. And yet, as charts and numbers flickered across the projector screen, her mind wandered. I'll help you walk again. David Carter's words had burrowed deep into her thoughts, echoing against everything the doctors had told her. It was madness, impossible, foolish, and yet she couldn't shake the steadiness of his gaze, the calm authority in his voice. Isabella, one of the board members snapped, your projections are outdated. We've already moved past the Morrison account. Her cheeks heated. She never lost focus during meetings. Never. But for the first time in her career, she had been distracted. When the meeting finally adjourned, Isabella returned to her office and pressed the intercom. Janet, come in. Her assistant, efficient and loyal, appeared within moments. I need you to research someone for me, Isabella said, discreetly. Who? David Carter works night maintenance here, she hesitated. Find everything you can, education, employment background. Janet raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Within hours, a neatly bound dossier sat on Isabella's desk. She opened it with trembling fingers. David Carter, age 28. Enrolled in the University of Portland's physical therapy program, GPA 3.9. Former U.S. Army medic specializing in trauma rehabilitation. Commendations for service. Professors described him as dedicated, brilliant, compassionate. Her eyes scanned further down and stilled. Personal details: widowed. His wife, Elena Carter, died in a car accident 3 years ago, survived by one daughter, Leela Carter, age 5. Isabella felt an unexpected pang in her chest. A single father, working nights, studying days, raising a child alone. She pictured him pushing that cleaning cart with quiet dignity, carrying more weight than most people ever knew. She set the file aside, unsettled. Who was this man who spoke with such conviction about her recovery? And why did his words feel more trustworthy than all the specialists she had paid? That night, Isabella stayed late again, waiting. At precisely 11:15, there was a knock. "Come in," she called. David entered, carrying not his usual cleaning supplies, but a thick folder filled with articles and diagrams. "Miss Grant," he began, placing the folder on her desk. "I've reviewed everything I could find on incomplete T12 fractures, neuroplasticity, and advanced rehabilitation methods. With your permission, I'd like to propose a supplemental therapy plan." Her brows shot up. "You researched my condition." "Yes, I don't presume to replace your doctors, but I believe there are methods worth trying. Evidence-based, proven in some cases, overlooked in others." Isabella stared at the folder. The neat diagrams, the highlighted studies from respected journals. This wasn't idle hope, this was science. "And why," she asked softly, "are you willing to invest so much of your time in me?" David's eyes darkened with memory. "Because I know what it's like when your world changes in an instant. When Alina died, I thought my life was over, but I had Leela. I had to learn to walk again, not with my legs, but with my heart. If I can help you rebuild yours, then my pain will mean something." For a moment, Isabella couldn't speak. Her fortress of cold logic cracked under the weight of his honesty. Finally, she whispered, "When do we start?" David's answer was immediate: "Tomorrow morning." The next morning, Isabella was already in her office when the first rays of sun touched the glass towers. She had barely slept. Every hour she had replayed David's words in her head. Tomorrow morning. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door opened. David stepped in, not with his janitor's cart, but carrying a portable massage table, resistance bands, and a worn leather bag stuffed with equipment. His movements were steady, professional, as if he'd done this 100 times before. "Good morning, Miss Grant," he said with quiet warmth. Her assistant, Janet, hovered in the doorway, anxiety etched across her face. "Are you certain about this? People are already talking. A janitor giving you therapy." "Close the door," Isabella interrupted firmly, "and hold all calls for the next hour." Janet hesitated, then obeyed. David set up his table with methodical care. "We'll start simple. Assessing muscle response, sensation, range of motion, nothing dramatic, just a baseline." Isabella's pulse quickened. She had endured months of clinical assessments that ended in disappointment. This felt different, intimate, risky. "Lie back," David instructed gently. "Trust me." Those two words, "trust me," made her chest tighten. She had trusted no one since the accident, but something in his voice made her obey. David's hands were firm yet careful as he guided her through the first tests. He pressed along her legs, checking sensation. "Tell me when you feel this." "Here," she said faintly as he reached her thigh. "Good, that's more response than your medical files indicated." He made notes quickly, his face alight with quiet satisfaction. Isabella blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your doctors underestimated the preserved pathways. There's potential here." Her heart stuttered. Potential, the word she had stopped believing in. He continued the tests, moving lower, then paused. "Now close your eyes, focus all your attention on your right foot. I want you to try wiggling your toes." Her throat tightened. "I can't." "Try anyway. Picture it in your mind. Visualize the movement even if you can't feel it." She squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating harder than she had in any board meeting. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then, just barely, the faintest twitch. "Did you see that?" she gasped. David's smile broke wide, radiant. "I saw it, minimal but definite, neural activity." Tears stung Isabella's eyes. "After 6 months of nothing, you're telling me." "I'm telling you," he interrupted softly, "that your nervous system is more intact than anyone realized. This is hope, Isabella." Her breath hitched at the sound of her name. He had dropped the formal title, speaking to her not as a CEO, not as a patient. but as a woman who needed to hear those words. Over the following days, their sessions became a ritual. At 6 in the morning, before the building stirred with employees, David arrived. They worked on visualization, gentle stretches, resistance exercises. Some days she made progress. Others she felt only frustration. But unlike the specialists who had written her off, David never faltered. "Every attempt matters," he explained one morning as she struggled with a leg lift. "Even failed ones strengthen the neural pathways. You're retraining your brain as much as your body." Isabella found herself looking forward to those hours more than anything else in her day. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. And in David's calm instructions, his quiet encouragement, she felt something even more dangerous than hope. She felt alive again. By the end of the second week, Isabella's office had become more than a command center of corporate strategy. It had turned into a sanctuary, a place where she dared to believe in possibilities again. Every morning at 6, David arrived with his quiet determination, and every morning she inched closer to progress. The world, however, had begun to notice. It started with whispers in the hallways, assistants exchanging glances as David wheeled in equipment, junior executives gossiping about the janitor, spending unusual amounts of time with the CEO. By the third week, rumors had spread across the company. Some said Isabella was desperate, clinging to false hope. Others said she had taken leave of her senses, letting a maintenance worker experiment on her. And a few, more vicious than the rest, suggested there was something improper between them. The gossip reached its peak when Victoria Hayes, one of the longest-serving board members, requested a private meeting. Victoria was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and impeccably dressed. She prided herself on being the guardian of Grant Industries' reputation. "Isabella," she began as she entered the office, "we need to talk." Isabella set aside her tablet, her spine stiffening. "About what?" "About this arrangement." "Arrangement?" "With your janitor," Victoria said bluntly. "Half the building is talking, it's not a good look." Isabella's jaw tightened. David Carter is not just a janitor, he's a physical therapy student with a military medical background. He's helping me recover. Victoria raised a skeptical brow. "Recover? Isabella, every doctor you've consulted said the same thing, you won't walk again. Now you've chosen to put your faith in a maintenance worker with a dream? It makes you look vulnerable." "Vulnerable?" Isabella's voice sharpened. "Do you mean weak?" Victoria held her gaze. "I mean compromised. Investors are nervous enough about your injury if they think you're entertaining fantasies instead of focusing on leadership." "That's enough." Isabella's tone was icy. "My leadership is not up for debate, nor is my personal recovery." Victoria's lips thinned. "I only speak because I care about this company. Don't let misplaced trust jeopardize everything you've built." When she left, Isabella sat in silence, her hands trembling, not from weakness but fury. Misplaced trust. David had given her more progress in 3 weeks than specialists had in 6 months. He had never once asked for anything. That evening, when David arrived for their session, he immediately noticed her tension. "Rough day?" he asked. "You could say that." She hesitated, then added, "Victoria Hayes thinks you're taking advantage of me." David froze, the strap of his equipment bag still in his hand. "I see. She believes you're after money, or influence, or something else." His eyes darkened with quiet hurt. "And what do you believe?" Isabella met his gaze, unflinching. "I believe she's wrong. In 3 weeks, you've given me more hope than 6 months of expensive specialists. You've never once asked for anything except the chance to help. If that's taking advantage, then the world needs more of it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "It bothers you, though," David said softly. "What does?" "That people think so little of me, or of you, that they can't imagine someone helping without an agenda." Isabella's throat tightened. She wanted to say more to reassure him, but the words caught. Because somewhere in the long hours of therapy, in the encouragement and the shared victories, she had begun to feel something deeper. Something Victoria would never understand. Not pity, not gratitude. Something far more dangerous. The following morning, Isabella sat waiting, her thoughts restless. She told herself she was prepared for another session, but her heartbeat betrayed her. Victoria's accusations had unsettled her, but not in the way she expected. When David entered at 6 sharp, his usual warmth was shadowed by restraint. He unpacked his equipment in silence. The air between them felt charged, tense, unspoken words pressing against the walls. "Let's begin," he said finally, his tone strictly professional. They worked through the routine, leg lifts, resistance bands, visualization drills. But the rhythm that usually flowed between them was gone. His hands were steady, his instructions clear, yet his eyes avoided hers. "David," Isabella said suddenly, halting mid-exercise, "this isn't working." He froze. "Your form is fine." "I'm not talking about the therapy," she interrupted. "I'm talking about you. You're different." His shoulders stiffened. He put down the resistance band. "Victoria's words, they stayed with me." She tilted her head. "Because you think she's right?" His eyes finally met hers, pained and searching. "Because I don't ever want you to question my intentions. You trusted me with something sacred, your hope. The last thing I want is for you to doubt that." "I don't doubt you," she said firmly. "Not for 1 second." The words lingered, heavier than she intended. David's expression softened, but something deeper flickered there, something he could no longer hide. "I came here to help you walk again," he admitted. "But somewhere along the way, I started caring about more than your recovery." Isabella's breath caught. "David." "I think about you when I'm not here," he continued, his voice raw with honesty. "About your strength, your fire, your laugh when you forget to be the Iron Queen for a moment. And I shouldn't. You're my patient, my boss, technically, but I can't help it." Her heart pounded. She had built walls her entire life, walls of power, of wealth, of cold indifference. No one had scaled them, until now. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked quietly, the weight of the question pulling at both of them. She swallowed hard. "What if I do?" The silence between them thickened, fragile as glass. Isabella's pulse thrummed in her ears. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to lower her guard just slightly. "I've never felt this way about anyone," she whispered. "Not even before the accident. Business was my life. Success was my lover. But you make me forget about all of that, even for an hour." David's hand brushed hers, not by accident, but with deliberate gentleness. "Then maybe we stop pretending this is just therapy." Her breath shook. "And risk everything." He gave a half-smile, bittersweet and bold. "Isn't that what you're already doing every morning? Risking the impossible, fighting to walk again when the world says you can't." Her laugh broke softly, trembling. "You always know what to say." "Only because it's true." The room seemed to shrink around them, the morning light casting soft gold across their faces. Isabella knew the choice was dangerous. Scandal, gossip, judgment. But sitting there with David's steady eyes locked on hers, the risk suddenly felt worth it. "Then we stop pretending," she whispered. And for the first time, Isabella Grant allowed herself to believe in something more terrifying and more liberating than recovery. She allowed herself to believe in love. 3 weeks after their confession, Isabella found herself standing, or rather, sitting, in a situation that made her more nervous than any board meeting ever had. She was about to meet David's daughter. The decision had been hers. After weeks of therapy sessions laced with whispered conversations and stolen moments, she realized that if she truly cared for David, she needed to know the most important person in his world. "Are you sure?" David asked as he wheeled the portable therapy table back into his bag one morning. His eyes, usually steady, flickered with uncertainty. "David," Isabella said, her voice firmer than she felt, If what's between us is real, I have to meet her. She's a part of you, a part I can't ignore. He studied her, then gave a slow nod. She's a lot, energetic, curious. She'll ask you about 1,000 questions in the first 5 minutes. Isabella smiled faintly. I've handled hostile investors. I think I can handle a 5-year-old. But as Saturday afternoon arrived and Isabella's driver pulled up to a quiet park on the edge of the city, her confidence wavered. Children shrieked on swings, families picnicked on blankets, and there, by the monkey bars, stood David, waving. Beside him, a tiny girl in a sunshine-yellow dress and pigtails bounced with excitement. "Daddy," she squealed, racing toward Isabella's chair before David could stop her. "Is this the lady?" Isabella blinked. "The lady." "The one you're teaching to walk," the child said matter-of-factly. She plopped onto the park bench beside Isabella, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are your legs broken?" "Leela," David scolded gently, "that's not polite." Isabella laughed softly, disarmed by the blunt honesty. "It's okay. Yes, my legs were hurt in an accident. Your daddy is helping me get stronger." Leela nodded solemnly, as if cataloging this important detail. "Do they hurt?" "Sometimes," Isabella admitted, "but less when your daddy works with me." "Daddy's really good at fixing people," Leela said proudly. "He fixed me when I was sad." Isabella tilted her head. "How did he fix you?" "He told me stories and hugged me a lot and made pancakes, chocolate chip ones. Pancakes fix sadness." David flushed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's exaggerating." "No, I'm not," Leela insisted. Then she leaned closer to Isabella, whispering conspiratorially, "Do you like chocolate chip pancakes?" "I love them," Isabella said. Leela's face lit up. "Then you can come to breakfast sometime." By the end of the afternoon, Isabella found herself holding a doll while Leela demonstrated how to braid its hair. The child's laughter was contagious, her questions endless, and to Isabella's own surprise, she wasn't overwhelmed. She was enchanted. As the sun dipped lower, Leela curled into Isabella's lap, chattering about her kindergarten adventures. David watched them from a few feet away, his heart tight with emotion. It had been years since he'd seen Leela take so quickly to anyone. "She likes you," he said softly as they prepared to leave. "I like her too," Isabella replied, smoothing Leela's hair. Then, with childlike innocence, Leela looked up and asked, "Is Miss Isabella going to be my new mommy?" Isabella's breath caught. David froze. "Sweetheart," David said gently, "that's not." "I think she should," Leela interrupted firmly. "She's nice, she smells pretty, and she didn't get mad when I spilled juice on her dress." Heat rose to Isabella's cheeks. She and David exchanged a glance, half panic, half wonder. Later, as he drove her home, Isabella stared out the window, her voice barely a whisper. "David, she's remarkable." He glanced at her. "No regrets?" "None," she said, turning to meet his gaze. "If anything, I'm more certain." And for the first time, Isabella Grant, a woman who had once thought family was a distraction, began to wonder if perhaps it was the one thing she had been missing all along. For weeks, Isabella balanced two lives. By day, she was the Iron Queen again, sharp, decisive, untouchable. By morning and evening, she was a fighter in recovery, letting David push her further than she thought possible. And in those quiet, stolen moments between stretches and exercises, she was a woman rediscovering her heart. But power attracts predators. The business press had begun whispering about her relationship with David. Tabloids published grainy photos of him entering the tower with therapy equipment. Headlines screamed, "CEO's secret romance with Janitor?" Stock analysts speculated about her fitness to lead. The final blow came when Morrison Tech, her fiercest rival, launched a hostile takeover bid. They were betting Sterling Industries was weak, its leader distracted, its image tarnished. At an emergency board meeting, panic spread like wildfire. "Morrison is offering shareholders 20% above market value," Janet reported. "Some are tempted." Victoria Hayes's voice cut through the din. This is exactly what I warned about. Your judgment has been compromised, Isabella. Investors see it. The world sees it. Isabella's fingers curled into fists on her lap. Once her injury had made her feel powerless. Not anymore. Enough, she said coldly. The room fell silent. Morrison thinks I'm weak. They think this company is weak. Tomorrow we show them just how wrong they are. That evening, David found her hunched over reports, exhaustion pulling at her frame. He placed strong hands on her shoulders. You're carrying the world again. I might lose everything tomorrow, she whispered. The company my father built, the empire I've bled for. David turned her gently to face him. And if you do, you're still you, still the woman who fought back when everyone else surrendered, still the woman he stopped, swallowed hard. The woman you what? Isabella pressed. The woman I love. Her breath caught. He had said it boldly, without hesitation. She reached up, her hand trembling as it touched his cheek. Then love me enough to believe I can do this. The next morning, Isabella wheeled herself into the boardroom like a general entering battle. She presented a dazzling strategy, proof that Grant Industries had just completed its strongest quarter in history, with expansion plans that would leave Morrison gasping. When Victoria sneered, "But what about your personal scandal?" Isabella met her gaze head-on. My personal life is my strength, not my weakness. I'm in a committed relationship with a man who helped me do what every doctor said was impossible. That makes me a stronger leader, not a weaker one. The room held its breath. Then Robert Chen, one of the most senior board members, began to clap. Others followed. Even Victoria, though her smile was tight, could not stop the tide. The vote to reject Morrison's bid was unanimous. That night, Isabella returned home to David. Without a word, she pulled him into her arms. We won, she whispered. No, he corrected softly, kissing her forehead. You won. 6 months into therapy, the impossible happened. It was an ordinary evening session. David guided her through a routine series of leg lifts. Her progress had been steady but modest, small twitches, fleeting sensation, moments of hope. Now, he said, stepping back, try standing with support. She braced herself, gripping the parallel bars he had installed in her penthouse. Slowly, with effort, she lifted. Her arms trembled, her legs wobbled, yet she was upright. Good, David encouraged. Now take a step. Her heart pounded. I can't. Yes, you can, trust me. She inhaled, summoned every ounce of will, and shifted her right foot forward. Then the left, one step, then another. By the time she reached David, she had walked 10 feet, unassisted. She gasped, tears blurring her vision. How did I just? Because you were ready, David said, pride and awe in his voice. Your body has been ready for weeks. Tonight, your mind caught up. Before she could respond, David dropped to one knee. From his pocket, he drew a simple diamond ring. Isabella Grant, he said, his voice unsteady for the first time, you taught me that miracles aren't just about muscles and bones. They're about belief, about love. Will you marry me? Her hands flew to her mouth. The ring sparkled through her tears. Yes, she whispered, then louder, laughing through sobs. Yes, absolutely yes. When he slid the ring onto her finger, she collapsed into his embrace, standing on her own legs. At that moment, Isabella realized the greatest miracle wasn't walking again. It was learning to love and be loved in return. Their wedding was held 6 months later in the botanical gardens Isabella had once visited as a child. Purple flowers lined the aisles, Leela's request, because Mommy in heaven loved purple. As music swelled, Isabella stood at the entrance, gripping David's hand for balance. Step by step, she walked down the aisle. The guests rose, tears glistening, as the woman once told she would never walk again moved steadily toward her future. At the altar, David's smile trembled with joy. Leela, bouncing in her flower girl dress, whispered loudly, "Daddy, she's walking." The crowd laughed, the tension breaking into applause. Their vows were raw, honest. Isabella said, "You didn't just help me walk again, you helped me live again." David said, "You gave me back family, hope, and love." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, David kissed her as she stood firm, unshaken. But their story didn't end at the wedding. Months later, they opened the Grant Carter Rehabilitation Center, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to spinal recovery. Isabella handled the business side, David led the therapy team. Together, they created a haven for people told recovery was impossible. The press called her recovery a miracle. Doctors wrote papers. Patients traveled from across the country for a chance to stand, to walk, to hope again. At home, their family grew. Leela called Isabella Mommy Bella, and soon a baby brother joined them, Michael Carter, born healthy and strong. One evening, years later, Isabella stood on stage at the center's annual gala. Her voice carried across the crowd. 5 years ago, I was told I'd never walk again. Tonight, I stand here not just on my own 2 feet, but beside the man who refused to let me give up. Our story proves that healing is not just science. It's love, and love, when brave enough, can make the impossible possible. The audience erupted in applause as David joined her on stage, Leela and Michael at their side. Isabella glanced at her husband, her children, and the hundreds of lives they had already touched. She whispered to herself, "No regrets, not one." Because the janitor who once promised her she would walk again had given her far more. He had given her a life worth living.